Everyone's sounding good today. Welcome to the Q&A episode for Monday, August 3rd of DeProgram with Ted Rall and Jamarl Thomas. I was just talking right before you came on, JT, to Robbie, who's like choking from the Washington State wildfires. Feels like he's getting sick. I mean, these have serious implications.
It's bad. I mean, I don't know if you saw the picture that I shared over on TMI. I took a picture of facing east. You can barely see the sun.
It's rough.
It's bad, and the fires are getting worse. So there's no rain in the forecast.
Yeah, when we had these in New York like a couple of years ago when they were really bad and the AQI was in the 400s, I was dying. I mean, I'm an asthmatic. It's not good.
Yeah. Wow. That's rough.
Anyway,
I mean, we don't see it here. I mean, in Virginia. I mean, we're further south.
Good. Yeah, I guess you're far enough south. It may not be an issue for the foreseeable future. I hope that remains the case. All right. So here's the deal for people who are unfamiliar and for people who are familiar, whether you like it or not. Every Monday and Wednesday, DeProgram brings you an extra hour of just totally open forum, free forum, Q&A, ask anything you want about anything you want. And we do our best to answer those questions and assuage your curiosity about this and that. And that's about it. So, all right. So, I don't know. Do we have any, let's see, before we get started here, if we have any ads or anything like that we can get to and get out of the way. All right. Let's see. Robbie, any questions yet?
Not yet. We have a what's up, people? We maybe just got our first one from John Park.
Okay.
Question: Is the modern U.S. military like Nazi Germany in World War II? Like how similar and complex their weapons were, too expensive, too complicated, and can't make them fast, which is the reason why they lost.
Well, that's not the reason why they lost, but I understand the point. Robert Speer was able to kind of correct a lot of that stuff, according to him anyway. I think it's overly priced. I mean, because again, the point is not, if you're a company, let's say you're Lockheed Martin, you're one of these companies, is your objective to win the war or is your objective to make a profit? Well, obviously your objective is to make a profit. So you're going to sell weapons as high as you can sell them because you want to make as much profit as possible. Do you want the weapon to work? Yes. But what's more important? The profit is more important, right? And so, yeah, if you are the U.S. and you're buying weapons, you would ideally want the best deal, but you really believe that the Congress members and the people who are like Trump or whatever are making the best deals for America, or are they making the best deals for the people who they have this kind of incestuous relationship with? Now, that's secondary to the war, though. These are two different concerns. One is how much does this stuff cost and the bang for the buck of the weapons that you're effectively paying for. And the other one is strategy. And the strategy being, well, we're not set up for these long 3, 4, 5-year wars in the way that might have been in the Second World War. It's just a different industrial base. Not to mention bad strategy. I mean, they attacked Iran believing that Iran was going to just collapse like the Soviet Union. And just like the Nazis got it wrong, we got it wrong. So it's both. It's strategy and cost. At least that's my point of view. What's yours, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Robbie.
Yeah, I'll take care of this while you take care on the back end. I think that both things are true. I think that it takes us so much longer and it costs so much more to make these really fancy, pretty sophisticated weapons as opposed to just like, I'll take our artillery, for example. We have HIMARS, and they cost a couple $1 million to make, and it takes like a month to make them. Meanwhile, the Russians can just pump out just good old-fashioned artillery rounds, tens of thousands of them for the price of one HIMAR. Yeah. So if you're having a war of attrition, which is what this is, there's a monetary cost involved with it, and also you have your burn rate. So how much is going to allow you to kill more enemy troops faster, and how much is it going to cost you to make it? Yes. In that equation, the dumb munition always wins. So it's quantity over quality. It's just, when my dad was in Korea, he was a Korean War veteran. when the Chinese came across the border, he was at the chosen reservoir and involved with the whole entire thing. He said they physically could not kill the Chinese fast enough. Like
Yes.
the barrels of the machine guns just kept melting, and so Russia's not playing that game, thankfully, because that'd be a hellacious butcher's bill. But at the end result, though, is the same. Just though China had more men, Russia has more munitions. So I think that's the math.
Yeah. I mean, even in Iran situation, think about the number, like they fire off like 3 or 4 missiles to take down one missile or drone.
Yep.
That math doesn't quite work. I mean, especially if you're firing off these expensive air defense against drones that are inexpensive. Like that math is just bad math. But but if we're being honest though, we're in a different era of war. Like it's kind of like the French still having cavalry and being shot down by the Nazi troops because from their point of view, this is the way we do war. This is our war doctrine, and that war doctrine doesn't necessarily fit the modern idea of war. And I think the Russian battlefield, for the most part, has made that clear. Like meaning it's different. Like this idea of 100,000 Russian troops coming together and lining up for an invasion. Okay, well that's not going to work, right?
Ah,
Those people are going to get hit by missiles, drones, and everything else with the U.S. intelligence looking at the organization of these people going up. I mean, it's not just the bad policy. It's a new doctrine that seems to be created in regards to war that now includes flying killer robots, which wasn't postulated before. I don't know. I
well,
think it's a bit of both. I agree with both.
I think it's von Clausewitz who said that artillery is the king of battles, or maybe it was Frederick the Great. No, it was Frederick the Great who said that. And so, if that's what you're doing, drones have a role. But
Yes.
at the end of the day, though, if it's a relatively stagnant battlefield, and what your objection is, if your objective is to not take land, but to just kill people,
Artillery is
then
key.
the volume matters. And so,
Yeah.
really the only reason why the United States is able to do this is because we are the world reserve currency, so we can write hot checks. The rest of the world has to cover it because they're still on dollars. Russia can't do that. So if they just use all their high tech stuff at one time, their economy couldn't sustain it. So what? So the answer is you wouldn't do that. You would just go with old tried and true dumb weapons and just save your good stuff for when it matters.
Yeah. I mean, they're putting the Oreshniks on the lines now, so those have been rolled out. But it seems that initially the Oreshnik was being tested. Like meaning when Russia launched it, it seems like they were actually doing reconnaissance on how well it does, how good it does, the efficacy of it. And so I suspect that we're going to start seeing more of those Oreshnik strikes hitting Kiev. The stuff starts rolling more and more off the front lines. Um, but no, it's a little bit of both. The U.S. has this full belief in technology. Like for example, NASA, a good example. NASA spent, I think it was like $10 million or something like that in order to create a pen that writes upside down, and Russia just used a pencil. And it's like, okay, well, you could spend the money to try to make something like that, but do you really want to spend the money to make something like that? Well, as you point out, Rob, the U.S., we make money out of thin air. I mean, the $10 trillion that we use for Iraq and Afghanistan, that wasn't backed by anything. That was just the government just basically writing IOUs and putting it on the deficit on the card. I'm saying when you have the ability to do that, your mindset is different. Like most countries, no country can do that. The U.S. Has the capability of doing that and creating that stuff out of thin air. And so you can imagine the level of a superpower that is. If I could take $10 trillion that doesn't
Mhm.
exist and use it to buy stuff, imagine what I can buy and imagine what I can do with the stuff that I buy. And
Yep.
imagine the mindset that you get when you do that. And so, yeah, you make weapons that are overly priced. You have companies because you believe in a capitalistic system and you buy those weapons. But again, the objectives of the company and the objectives of the state are going to be very different. The state is using it because of the use value. The companies are using it because they can sell it. And yeah,
Which is why, really, if defense is important to your country as opposed to capitalism, you probably should have a weapons manufacturer be conducted not by private corporations but by state entities.
or have some kind of vested interest in both. Like meaning the companies themselves somehow can't profit from the war, if that makes sense. I don't know. That one's a tough one for me. I mean, like I would think that other countries have it more tethered to where their lot in life is tethered to your lot in life, if that makes sense.
I think it was for the United States. This is like a hobby. It's a hobby project. It doesn't. This war doesn't matter to them. To be honest,
Yes.
with you, neither war really matters to the United States.
Yeah, it's not existential.
Yeah,
It's a war.
yeah. It is what it is. It's a way that you can inflate the stock market. Maybe do some favors to some of your favorite friends. Look at you, Marion Adelson, and do some things. And you can do that till you can't. But losing the war in Ukraine for Russia would potentially end Russia.
It'd be existential.
Yeah.
No, the United States.
Both sides view it as the Ukrainians view it as existential too, though.
Yeah, but the United States does.
At this point. At this point, they should. Because what's going to be left of Ukraine, I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's going to be Yugoslavia.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if like Poland and some of these other countries are going to lay claim to Western Ukraine. I don't think Poland even, they hate Ukrainians at this point. Well, they hate Russia.
Poland has some historical claims to Western Ukraine. Yeah.
Right.
Well, as a part of
I
it.
guess my thing is Russia. The problem with Russia is going to have is how do they stop? Like, meaning if they stop, then what happens? Okay, does Europe go into Ukraine? Does Europe try to fill it with weapons? Does Europe do all that stuff? Which means that Russia can't just stop.
With what? What can Europe go into Ukraine with? I'm not being facetious. I'm being that's just what army? With what? You can put the entire British army into a football stadium.
Yes.
What the hell are they going to do?
I mean, honestly, if they put 1,000, 2,000 troops in, Russia's going to have to continuously kill those troops.
And they're happy to do that.
Even if it's a small number as a trigger. I mean those people are going to get slaughtered. They have to.
Laura Loomer a couple of days ago, I follow her on X because I like pain, I guess. And she was just like,
and because you dig her looks.
Oh, she's so awesome. She's beautiful. She was like, I sure hope that Trump kills Putin. It's like, first, do you realize that Putin is the only reason that Ukraine isn't a parking lot at this point? So killing him would actually do a favor for people of my political persuasion, which is to turn Ukraine into a parking lot and get it over with. These people are stupid.
Loomer is a lunatic. In fact, apparently Loomer had been at the radio station once, at our radio station.
Oh my God.
And apparently Mindia flipped out.
Really? Why?
Well, so Lee Stranahan, he's passed by now. I think Lee passed earlier this year.
Yeah, he did.
Lee was friends with her. And apparently when he was on Fault Lines, he brought her to the studio for some kind of political commentary. And whatever she said was so outlandish that Mindy flipped out. Who is this?
Well, he flips out pretty easily, but he's very right wing.
Oh, but she must have said something truly dumb on air for him to lose it with her being.
Well, she's truly dumb.
Yeah.
Or maybe she's not dumb, but she traffics in the dumb is what she does.
She seemed to be a lunatic.
Yeah.
She seems.
And by the way, it's so amazing how, I'm always fascinated by, political changes of heart that take place with no explanation,
Right.
And here's Ariana Huffington. I was a right winger and married to a gay man and a closeted gay man, and now I'm a liberal. And it's like this, but it's just going to happen. I'm not going to explain it. I'm not going to no announcement. Like, oh, by the way, and that's what Laura Loomer did with Ukraine. Like she was like going on and on and on about how Ukraine was a grift and Zelensky was a pig and all this. Now she's totally like on team Ukraine 100%, but no explanation. Like, oh, like now I can see clearly now, like nothing. We don't know why. She just flipped.
I just assumed she got a free trip to Ukraine, or for that matter, the Trump administration was going in a particular direction that she understood where she was supposed to go. But I don't know. Because it was overnight. It was just out the blue.
Could well be.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's because Zelensky.
It was very strange.
I think it's because Zelensky is a Jew, and because Iran was helping Russia early on with the drones and stuff, and now that Israel and the United States are at war with Iran, it just links those two philosophies together. Like a global Jewry has to stand together against the Iranian devil, and Russia is at war with the Jewish president of a major Eastern European country, and Iran was helping Russia kill Yukis, and I think that's what this is. It's just another way of demonizing. That's what I say. Oh, Russia's supporting Ukraine. Russia's obviously.
I'm sorry, Robbie. Good. I'm sorry.
Russia's obviously is supplying targeting data to Iran, But Russia's not actively helping Iran. Iran's made it very clear they don't want foreign help. They'll take care of this themselves.
Yeah, they say that. I hope that's not true.
Oh, I hope it's not true either.
Meaning, I hope behind the scenes that. So there are two ways to look at it. The United States is claiming that the Russians are helping the Iranians with the targeting data to hit CIA sites, but we don't know that. It's like it feels like for example, even now, where they say something like, "Well, Trump calls off the strikes because the Gulf states effectively asked him to stop." Basically, they beseeched the king to not do the strikes. But keep in mind, all of this is this idea that, well, he's not doing this because of Iran. He's doing this because the Gulf states asked him. Or it's not that Iran has the capability of hitting the CIA black sites. It's that the Russians and the Chinese are helping them do so. Meaning it's the way of trying to minimize Iran's material, technical, scientific capability and put it as if it's some other superpower that's doing it, because it has to be a superpower that's doing it, because Iran doesn't have the capability to do this to another superpower. That nonsense. It's very possible that Iran does have the ability to hit those sites. They've been preparing for this war for a very long time. It's very possible they already had the intel to do so, or the Russians are helping them. God knows I hope the Russians are, but we don't know that as a flat fact. At least
I can't prove it. But if I had to hazard a guess, JT, I honestly think that probably Wagner is there. I think Wagner, so that way the Russians have the deniability. That's a mercenary group. They're this Blackwater. Here's what it is. Sure, I mean they're using.
By the way,
That would not shock me.
It would not shock me at all. It would not shock me at all. And also, Wagner's busy kicking the crap out of American proxies in Africa. So if you're getting experience of killing America's friends in Africa, what stops you from getting more experience with killing America's friends in the Middle East?
I mean, I hope they are helping. Like, Lord knows, I hope the Russians are helping with it. I mean, because the U.S. has been assisting in the killing of Russians for the last 4 or 5 years, and has been dumping money into it, and has been talking about how great it is of what Ukraine is effectively doing, which are effectively terrorist attacks. Yeah. So why wouldn't the Russians look for an opportunity to injure U.S. interests?
No reason.
They should do it.
Yeah, true.
100%.
By the way, there was about the comparison with the Nazi army and the U.S. army. I would say there's at least one really big, comparison that really works, which is both countries. I mean, both militaries were radically overextended.
Yes.
Nazis were in. You look at the map. Think about the first time you were a kid studying World War II. You see the map of Germany before 1939, and then you see Nazi-occupied Europe and the Western Soviet Union in North Africa. And you're like, yes. I don't even understand how you could do that, right? I mean, of course, obviously, they used a lot of puppet regimes to accomplish that, just in the same way that Imperial Japan did, covering an equivalently massive territory in the Pacific Rim. But
right.
It's kind of unsustainable and doesn't really make sense. It's a minnow eating a whale. It's like, what? The U.S. is the same way. I mean, we are massively overextended. It's like Rome in the third and fourth centuries, right?
The German military was astonishing. You got to give them credit. I mean, especially in the beginning of the war.
No doubt.
And they would come up with battle plans in no time, in order to, these kind of tactical fights and everything else. They were astonishingly good. And it was the Soviets learned in the process of fighting the Germans how to beat the Germans. But God, that was an expensive lesson to learn.
Yeah, and Scipio against Hannibal.
Yeah. But you can make the argument that the American military, I agree with you, is overextended. I mean, and weirdly enough, trying to use puppet regimes to do the same thing that the Nazis were trying to do. Meaning, we want Europe to take over Ukraine. We want Israel to take over, so on and forth. We will deal with China. Or we would have
Venezuela, same thing. We would like to do that in Cuba.
Yeah.
We know we can't occupy directly, right? We're not going to be like the first Afghan war where we send in we send in all our supplies. As the Brits were bringing in their desks over the mountains into Afghanistan.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, they brought in wooden desks on the back of their camels and mules. They even had they did. They brought in everything. They were literally seriously, study the first Afghan war. It's fucking amazing. Like in 1839, they were like, what did they bring? They brought their camp followers. They brought their wives and their children. They were like, we live here now. And literally, if you look at the list of inventory, literally it's like, oh, we had 12 camels for our cigars. We had 27 camels for our wine. Of course, an English gentleman doesn't go anywhere without a bunch of scotch and brandy. So, I mean, it's like lugging this shit over the Hindu Kush. Like, what the fuck? Oh,
Yep.
It's part of the Himalayas. Gee,
Yep.
I wonder why they lost.
But one thing, I mean, in a lot of ways, the Russians owed their survival to the Greeks in World War II. And here's why. Italy was supposed to conquer Greece. The Greeks actually beat them back and invaded Albania and was pushing them back. The troops that Hitler sent to Greece to rescue the Italians were originally supposed to be sent to Rommel so he could defeat Montgomery and then go all the way to the Caucasus.
Right.
And because those troops ended up not being able to go, Operation Barbarossa was delayed by like 3 months. So then here you are right in the middle of the Russian winter. But more importantly, Rommel did not have the brigades that he was supposed to have to go to Baku. If the Italians didn't suck, which this could be a very different conversation.
Yeah, and they had to make it to Baku, right? This was all, I mean, a lot of people, Americans don't understand, like only a lunatic would have invaded the Soviet Union, right? But the idea wasn't to topple the Soviet Union. The idea was to get the oil from the Caspian Sea. So because there was an Allied naval blockade preventing oil from getting into Nazi-occupied Europe.
Yeah. And Rommel begged Hitler, don't do this. You don't need Greece. You need this.
Fuck Greece. Right. You can get it later. Right. But yeah, it was a point of pride, I think, kind of like almost Trumpy, like, but I had it and I don't want to lose it. But in chess, sometimes you have to like lose a pawn or two to get something more important,
That's right. It's always an exchange. I mean, you're talking about a war. You don't have infinite resources. You can't cover everything.
Yeah. He hated the whole idea of withdrawing from anything or losing anything that he'd already captured.
Yeah. Right.
He must have, I bet Hitler was a terrible chess player, I would imagine.
Well, imagine having to tell Hitler or Stalin, sir, we need to pull back. And like the people used to talk about how like
okay, Stalin, I'll shoot you. Yeah.
Yeah, the blocking detachments. I mean, and by the way, did you see the story about the Ukrainian blocking detachments?
No.
They were killing all of these. Oh God, there was a story that recently came out talking about the number of people that Ukraine was killing for trying to effectively leave or flee. And this, on some level, makes sense. I mean, if you think about the number of people that they've been kidnapping. So you are a person who is walking your Chihuahua and a bunch of 4 guys out of a truck grab you and throw you into the truck. Yeah, they're pressing you into the truck. Okay, well, you're not signing up for the war. You're being forced into the situation.
Yeah, and you're gonna run away at the earliest opportunity.
And you may try to run at first opportunity, in which case they've been ordered to shoot.
Yeah. I bet a lot of. I wonder how many of the Ukis have who had the chance, surrendered to the Russians. Like, hey, can I get over those lines and surrender?
Yeah, I suppose many did.
Yeah,
I strongly suspect many did. I mean, if you remember, Russians were even guiding people out with drones and sending messages about where they can go in order to surrender, so they won't get shot.
Now, the only question is if the Ukis ever get repatriated back to Ukraine, I wouldn't want to be them. I mean, that's a Nazi regime.
I mean, would you even go back under those?
Better not to go back ever.
Yeah. I mean, how do
if the Russians will have you, best to stay.
Yeah. How do you sneak back in? I mean, what is your ID? Meaning, are they going to have the association with your ID? So the first thing that they
even at the end of hostilities, I would really, unless the Ukrainian government has been completely overhauled and overthrown. I mean, I'd be like, yeah, they've got this. They're Azov deep over there.
Which they will be. Russia don't have a choice. I mean, there's no way you can go through all of this and then leave a Nazi government in play.
No, that's true. All right, we gotta hit some comments. All right, so it is the Q&A show. Robbie, thanks for the $1. By the way, you are describing inverted totalitarianism.
Chris Hedges, I think it was Chris Hedges.
FUSO also thanks for the $1. Going to see Santana and the Doobie Brothers on August 11th in San Diego. What is your favorite 70s rock band? Oh man, dude, there's so many. I mean, I'm going to omit punk and new wave just because when I think of 70s rock, I mean, those are 70s rock bands. Like the Human League is a 70s rock band, but I'm going to omit those because they're sort of different. The Ramones are different. Yeah. When I think of 70s rock, I think of those kind of bands like the Doors or whatever, although they were a 60s band, really.
Let me take it first. because that
Go.
sounds like
You go
you have a lot.
first. You go first.
I think of America. I think of Chicago. I think of Steely Dan. Um, let me see. And see, we're saying rock bands, so we're not talking about black bands. Those are the first three that come to mind. But I know there's Led Zeppelin is another one.
Yeah, that has to come up.
Yeah.
Even though they originated in the '60s, I have to go with Pink Floyd.
Oh, Pink Floyd is another one.
Because the
Yeah.
thing about Pink Floyd is, I have all their albums. I listen to them with great frequency, and they never get old.
They
They're
don't.
surprising every fucking time.
Yeah. What is? Oh God, what is that album? The one with Money on it.
Oh, that's not Wish
That
You Were
album
Here.
is fantastic. That album is great.
I like
And
the
that-
lesser ones too, like Uma Guma and
Uh-huh.
Adam Hart Brought Mother, and I just listened to Obscured by Clouds yesterday.
Scared by Clouds. I think of that. Probably Steely Dan is probably one of my favorites.
Well, they're fantastic.
Still, just an amazing. Like he sucks by himself. By the way, Donald Fagen. If you ever
True.
heard of the album,
True.
oh, it sucks. But as a band, I
By
mean,
the way,
what's wild about it is the
Best,
show.
all right, best hair band, Foreigner.
See, I wasn't into hair bands.
Nor was I, but you couldn't avoid them back then.
Yeah. But see, I was born in '77, so I wasn't like living during the '70s.
Right.
In that sense. No, I had to go back in time for that stuff. It's wild though how like an individual is going to have a certain world that they create, and then you pair that person with another person and with their world, and you come up with a product, and the product is better than individuals could ever do on their own.
And what's also funny is how often the band members themselves, like for whatever reason, like they're arguing about money or
Yes.
artistic direction, they don't see that, right? Like okay, Annie Lennox, she's fantastic, but man, with Dave Stewart, the Eurythmics are much better, right? Than they just and I know Annie Lennox doesn't think that. Chrissy Hynde, she doesn't think that. She thinks like, she once said, "Oh, the Pretenders are whoever I hire." And that might well be, from a business point of view, true, but nothing beats the original lineup, right?
Right.
I mean, from
Music
Pretenders
sounds
1 and
different.
Pretenders 2.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, because sometimes you don't see it.
Yeah,
Like
true.
part of my rationale for saying I need a producer is because I realized when I was at Fault Lines, it was a collaborative thing. It was
Well,
kind of
this
like
show is a great example. I mean, I know that we're better together than I would be solo. You do solo. I can do solo. I have done solo, but together's better.
I enjoy it more.
Yeah, and I think it has more. It has. Yeah, it's easier to get through, but it's also just. I think there's obviously it's a different dynamic, and some people will prefer the solo thing. But I think definitely a good. I mean, it can be painful, like Hannity and Combs. That was a painful combination, right? Because basically, Alan Combs was just there to be beaten up. But
Right. But he knew his job. That's what they brought him there for, right?
that's true. It was Mutt and Jeff, right? I mean, totally. Okay. $10. Thank you so much from Dead Bean Club. Really appreciate you. Glad to see the war is over again. Woohoo! Markets still look very bearish. Yeah.
Well, they should be bearish. I mean,
They should be barrier, right?
How on earth does Trump have the capability of ending the war short of a unilateral pullout?
There's
And the
no
answer
way.
is he doesn't. I mean, over the weekend, if you notice, Donald Trump pulled back from those strikes because of Iranian power
Yeah.
and the fear of what was going to take place if he went through with those strikes. Okay, that's a limit. And he's never going to say that. Right?
No.
That is never going to be the thing that he say. But that is true. I kept saying the U.S. has limits. The U.S. has limits. And people didn't believe me. Oh, Trump is a wild man. Trump is crazy. Trump can do whatever he wants. Trump has limits. And I think we're seeing them. So, yeah. Is the war over? No, it's not. Because I can't foresee the United States just saying, all right, we're taking up all and going home.
Did you see Trump's Truth Social post an hour ago? Said that the blockade will continue until either Iran makes a deal or surrenders. It's like, what part of you have lost the war? Do you not understand? I mean,
Apparently
this is
all
like
of it.
this is Nero fiddling while Rome burns. So
And by the way,
is
him
more than
saying,
that.
well, we're going to keep our blockade. But we need to understand it's a blockade of a blockade. Right? Like it's an odd thing to say we're going to blockade your blockade. And how long can the U.S. last versus how long can Iran last? especially if Ansar Allah continues the blockade on the Red Sea. I'm skeptical that the U.S. can tolerate the pain that will be coming to the U.S., especially if oil goes in the direction that you would think it's going to go with the Straits blockaded. But we'll see.
We shall.
Trump ain't there. Trump ain't billions of dollars.
All right. FUSO says, by the way, my name is Eric with a K. Thanks for the dollar. Also, FUSO, someone needs to make a Laura Loomer horror movie. She makes one every day on the internet.
How on earth has she gotten this popular?
That's a great question. Yeah, Robbie, help me out here. You're the neighborhood right winger here. What the fuck? How did she start? Like, how did she? I mean, like for me, I don't know who the fuck she was. And then suddenly it's like, oh, there's this influencer and she's really important on the right. And here she is. And then I checked her out and I'm like, and like I get like there's a lot of right wingers I see on media, on social media. And I'm like, I get why this person is a big deal, like Ben Shapiro. I don't get why she's a big deal.
It's because, she's important with Republicans, not the right. The right hate her just as much as the left does.
Really?
Oh God, yes. I mean, the America First people like me despise her, like with an abject. I would rather, for example, the two of you are politically to my left, and I thoroughly enjoy working with y'all. Y'all are friends. Absolutely, just love it.
Thank you, Ron.
If Laura Loomer offered me $100,000 to work for her, I would tell her to stick it up her bum and go get food stamps.
Not worth
because I despise her. Because I despise her that much. Now, to answer,
you better take that money.
No, I hate her.
I'm just telling you, better take that money.
My principals wouldn't let me do
For
it.
a couple hours a day, you can always come back to us.
Yeah, we won't tell anyone.
My principals wouldn't let me do it.
You should cheat on us,
But that's the problem with having.
You have an open relationship.
But to answer your question about how she got popular is because she got into the Trump wagon really early back in 2015, and she stayed loyal to him like a tick on a mule, and she just hang on.
People like that online, right?
She rage clicks. She's very good at rage clicking, and that's what then Twitter rewards. That's the algorithm. It's all about getting.
Wasn't she prettier before she fucked up her face too?
She was never pretty. I mean, maybe in a dark room with a bag over her head.
Less ugly. I mean, I've seen the older pictures. She was more. She was just sort of an ordinary, kind of girl. Now,
I don't know. I don't think that Larry Loomer was ever particularly attractive, so I'm not really sure how
I didn't
that would
say
work.
she was hot. I'm just saying she wasn't. I don't know. Whatever.
She wasn't
there's a rumor that she was boning the Donald. Do you think
I'm looking up the photo now because I was curious on what she looked like before all the surgery. You're right.
She
surgery
definitely
fucked her up. I didn't think. I mean, she didn't look horrible.
She was not. She wasn't a hottie. But she was definitely. She looked okay. Now she's like. Seriously, she should sue for what happened to her.
Yeah, she looks rough right now. The surgery didn't.
She looks. Seriously, she looks worse than Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop looks like he was run over by a train multiple times, and that the train got the worst of it. But holy shit, he's like horrible. She's horrible. She's literally the worst plastic surgery disaster I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's bad. But let's.
She's worse than Michael Jackson.
I don't know if you can get worse than Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson's bad. Yeah,
that was bad. Yeah. There's something wrong with people who look. I was always against plastic surgery unless it was something that was major. Because one of you just be you, right? If it's a defect, fair enough. Like I said,
sure. Or you have an accident and your face is broken.
Yeah, on the no points, I get it. But I was always against because my ex used to be like, I want to get surgery.
Really? Can I ask you what she wanted to do?
It used to always annoy the shit out of me because there was somebody else in my life who she was jealous of. There was nothing going on with the person, but she was jealous of the person. The person had plastic surgery. And as I kept pointing out, A, I don't know if that's true. And B, it doesn't really matter. How does that affect you? Especially considering you're already gorgeous. I was head over heels for my ex. I've never been that attracted to a person. And so it used to always annoy the shit out of me. It's like, I want to get my nose done, and I want to get it tweaked, and I want to get this, and I'm like, I will not deal with you if you do that. I will not deal with you. Because A, I don't trust your motives in wanting it. There's that. And B, it is radically unnecessary. Like, to be extremely attractive and then to say, yeah, I think I want to get my nose done. Why? Why? I mean, at that point, it's just insecurity on self, and it's this denigration of self. You don't need it.
I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I don't pretend to be one. I think that he was probably a product of the abuse that he had as a kid, had low self-esteem, and he hated himself.
You talking about Michael Jackson?
Yeah. I think that's what it is.
He certainly was abused.
Loomer.
Yeah, he was terribly abused.
But Laura Loomer, I mean, she's just evil. I mean, seriously, for her, that's what it is.
Would you accept terrible abuse if you could end up being the greatest pop legend of all time? Is it worth it?
No, because what profits a man if you get the whole world but you lose your soul? I mean, seriously, what at the end of the day, if you look in the mirror, and if you don't like the person that's looking back, what does any of it else matter?
Agreed.
I agree with that. And look, I can consider that question because I was horribly abused as a kid, and I have to say, and I know that probably it motivated me to earn to do better. I got to say that, like, if I could choose just having having had a happy childhood or a normal childhood and just have worked not be notable, just be like an engineer or whatever, work in a shop, I would take that.
You would take Ted Raw barista over?
Yeah, 100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing is, a nasty childhood fucks you up for life.
Yeah, but it depends on whether you can reorient.
Well, you can adapt to it, but you're still. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's like being in a terrible accident, and you can learn how to walk again, and you can go through PT, but you're never really the same.
Well, at the end of the day, though, what matters is what's in here, right? Because we all get older. Physically, we're all going to change, and physically, we're all going to get sick. We're all going to break down. What matters is in your mind, how you perceive things. That's one of the reasons why I like to read so much. Like, right now, I'm reading this again. What's Left by Ted Rawl. Great book.
Who, none abused to Ted Rawl, probably would never have written that. But yeah,
right? I mean, like,
I picked this up on Saturday.
Yep, great book.
What is it called?
The Rape of Nanking. John Rabe was one of the unsung heroes of World War II. That man should have a statue put up to him in every major city on Earth. Because if you want to be a true hero, John Rabe was that man. And then my camera's going out. And now I'm reading The Sorrow in Our Hearts, The Life of Tecumseh. So get out of your own head and start reading.
Upper reading.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, just my camera just glitched out, whatever. But seriously, I mean, just read. If people read and exercise your mind, you're able to get out of the spot that you're in, where you just think about, this is what society says I have to look like, or this is what I have to be interested in. Reading lets you get into the real world. That's why it's so important. Turn off the TV and read a book.
The library was definitely my safe space as a kid. I would go straight there after school on days I didn't have any extracurriculars, and I would stay there until dinner time every single day, and on the weekends too.
Chess was my safe space.
I'm disgusted by the fact that there are libraries that are not open 7 days a week. No, libraries should have long opening hours. They should be. I think they should be open 24 hours, really.
I don't know about 24 hours, but I agree with you that they should be open. They should be. It should be more inviting. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
And it used to be to honest. I mean, we used to have several libraries here in Virginia. I mean, even in Richmond, we used to have a massive library in the center of town. I don't know what happened. I guess the internet changed all that. The model changed the moment that people can plug into the internet and,
Yeah.
The death of a library is the death of civilization. Seriously.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. I mean, the reason why I say I don't buy that is because any book that I want, I can pretty much get on my phone. And you could say that going into a library is kind of like going into a record shop where you can actually see and touch and look at the various things.
And there's serendipity. You could blunder into something you never thought of.
Yes, true.
Well, keep in mind, whenever I say library, I'm not just talking about just a brick and mortar library. I read ebooks. I read everything. The point is that people have got to start reading more. Reading is how reading for your brain is like a whetstone for a knife. If you don't read, the neurons in your brain, the synapses don't fire, your brain doesn't grow. You've got to read.
And then you end up in Congress.
But well, if you're a reader, you'll end up in Congress.
That's my point.
Right.
All right.
I don't know. I mean, the reading thing is important. I agree with you. But it's like what percentage of people are going to do that? And more to the point, most of those people are living their life like they're better life.
Let's do
I
some.
think I agree, though.
As someone who's never finished high school and has never been to college, I owe everything that I have in life to the written word.
Robbie, I got a question for you before we take the listener questions. Would you, if someone offered you a full scholarship, would you go to college?
It would depend on what I got to study. If I was able to,
whatever you wanted. Let's say you could study whatever you wanted, wherever you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you take?
I would major in history, and I would do a secondary in economics. And I tell you right now, the university I would want to go to, I would go to China. Because the Chinese, they are a nation of engineers, and they think long term. And that's the biggest problem that we have here in the West, is that we can't think ahead 30 minutes from now. And as quickly as the world is changing right now, you've got to be able to start thinking beyond the horizon.
I mean, practically, there would be a language problem, though, because they would speak in Chinese. They would only teach in Chinese, right?
That's fine. I can learn Chinese. I mean, that's immersion, right? I mean, you drop me in Beijing for a year, I guarantee you I'll learn Mandarin.
I don't think that's true. Chinese is hard.
Buy that. Yeah. I don't buy that. The reason why I say that, I know people who dropped in other countries.
I mean, could you imagine me trying to speak Chinese with a Southern drawl?
That's funny.
But I think Chinese is hard, man.
I've known people who were dropped in Nepal and they were trying to learn the language. Like basically they were there for like a, what do they call it? Like an exchange program. Mm-hmm. And they had been there for like a year trying to learn the language and everything else. And they were straightforward. It was like, shit's hard.
Well, I think, because it's so different from our language, from like Romance languages. I mean, I think you could do that in Italy, probably.
Oh, like pick the language up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, even the bathing, like she was saying how she had watched an animal get killed, like upstream, and they were like taking a bath in the water downstream, and how she was like cringing at being watched in this. Oh God, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. I don't think China's going to be that bad though, but Jesus, depends on where you are.
No, I mean, like I will say, France has programs like that where they love to have Americans come and study there. And like you get admitted, they send you to the college that they think you're most appropriate for. And it's really cheap. And and the thing is, they guarantee you at the end of 4 years, you'll be fluent in French too. They teach you both. They teach you in English. So you're not, you're not learning history in French, but they teach you French at the same time. And, also it's harder to learn a language when you get older.
Yes. Yes. And by the way, I've always regretted that of all the things, I've always wanted to write a book and I've always wanted to learn a second language.
Well,
I've done it.
Yeah. Well, there's still time. I would love to learn Russian. I feel like for some reason it works with me. It's a language that like, it just makes sense to me somehow, weird way, like German doesn't, but like, all right. Anyway, let's do some more questions here. All right. This one's for you, Jamarl, from Kilroy for Prez. What's your thoughts on members of the Black community playing the We Were This and That game and this and that game? Sorry. The thoughts of members of the Black community playing the We Were This and That game, laying claim to all sorts of technological innovations like cell phones or microwaves. And number two, same guy, are your thoughts on Black Hebrew Israelites used to work with one, and he was a very, very hateful person, felt bad for how much hate he had in his heart and mind.
Yeah.
I've seen those guys at Times Square.
Well, I don't quite understand the first one. What do I think about Blacks who claim that Black people discovered microwaves?
Cell phones and microwaves that basically Black people invented all sorts of things. I don't know. Black people did invent all sorts of things.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you go back in time, like Pythagorean theorem, these type of things were necessary for even the pyramid to be built. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that Pythagoras takes it is kind of outrageous. Like, so there's certain things that you can, like, meaning you can't have a pyramid without the Pythagorean theorem, and yet Pythagoras gets the credit for it. Like, you can go down history and see stuff like that. True. But I think some of the stuff that boils down to insecurities. Like, I really do. Like, when James Brown is singing "I'm Black and I'm Proud," okay, white people don't do that, right?
Some do, but like
Well, yeah, you have the white power thing, but those are seen in a particular light because
Yeah.
those people are behaving in a particular way.
Mhm.
Blacks are saying it purely for issues of insecurity brought about by the societal.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter. It really is silent Black Lives Matter too.
That's what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
And so it's
Black
like
is
when
beautiful. Black is beautiful too. Right.
right. Like it's almost like you have to say it as opposed to it just being true.
Right.
And the reason why it's not accepted as true is because your society had a bias that
Black
told you
people are accomplished too. Black people are smart too.
yeah. Like they used to say, he's so good at chess. Okay. But they were saying it in the context of he's a black child who can
Right.
decimate his opposition in the game. Right. It's not just he's a child who plays. It's the black part that also factors into it with the idea of intelligence and ability to basically beat a bunch of white people in the game. Yeah, I think this stuff is insecurity. I think it's brought about by insecurity. Same thing with rap videos. It's like, look at my women and look at my money and look at my, my whip in my house that they don't really ultimately own. Okay, this is projecting because they're trying to be this Uberman because for the longest time they've been called boy. I think this stuff is a repudiation of society, and unfortunately,
This morning we talked about Jewish supremacy in Israel and how it's the basis. It's certainly the strong basis of Israeli politics these days, right? Like Jews are not only the chosen people. Apparently, we're going to be the only people after we're done killing everyone else in our part of the world.
Right.
What are I mean, that's obviously also born from insecurity after centuries of discrimination and pogroms and genocides directed at them.
Good point.
It's like you can't kill us anymore. Now we're going to kill you.
And not just that, we're God's chosen people. God chose us. The God of the universe.
We're not just equal. We're better than you.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, but that's where I factor in, if I understand the question, this idea that blacks created cell phones. Black created rocket ships. Blacks created this. Blacks created that. Look, if you're talking about a black American being a part of it, potentially, I mean, these things aren't created by one individual.
I mean, Jamal, have you been to the African American History Museum in Washington?
Have I been to that? Maybe once.
So,
maybe once. I was young. I was a kid if I went.
I don't think you were. No, they only built it like 10 years ago.
Then
It's got a very cool building. But okay, so I went like shortly after it opened, and what struck me, first of all, I was very disappointed because it's one of those museums that doesn't like. I like a museum that has like the artifacts, like here is Richard Nixon's resignation letter,
right.
Here is an actual slave collar, right? Like here's the chain that like the Sultan Ahmet broke through the Bosphorus, right? Like, and it's like. It really doesn't have a lot of those things. It has a lot of displays. It's like a lot of videos, a lot of stuff to read. But the real emphasis is basically about Black accomplishment. It's like, look, here's all our entertainers. Here's all our musicians. Here's our scientists. Here's our great historic figures. Here's the people who fought for emancipation. Blah 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 blah. And obviously, that's all unimpeachable, and it's kind of useful for people who might like to have it all in one place in the same way that But it struck me as it was a little annoying because it's sort of like it. Okay, basically, the main theme of the museum is, hey, you might not know this, but Black people have accomplished a lot, and I'm like, well, I do know that. And it's kind of like, and I'm like, I mean, I think most Americans actually know that who have any brains at all. So it's kind of like, to me, the emphasis of the museum should be different and more than just that. But that was it's an insecurity themed museum.
Yeah. I mean, but again, the insecurity is not coming from nowhere.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's not like not like you're in a relationship.
There's a reason for it.
There's a reason for it. Yeah. Right? It's like this other person in the relationship is like
you keep legions of psychologists. It's in business forever. Yeah.
Well, James Baldwin used to make this argument that when he got into this argument with Malcolm X about whether or not they had a debate on whether or not Black should leave. Mm-hmm. And James Baldwin made this point to him like, dude, you could leave tomorrow and everything in you would still be organized around America. Like, meaning you're still in America.
Wherever you go, there you are, right?
Wherever you go, there you are. You can't get away from it. It's, but he also makes this point about how white people used to act like we weren't integrated. And he was like, from the moment the first Black person came over, we were integrated, meaning you were having a relationship with somebody, whether you wanted to acknowledge that relationship or not, and how that other person behaved on some level is associated with how you behave. It's a tandem. You can't have it both ways. Mm-hmm. And you can make the same argument about the homosexual community. You can make the same argument about transgender. You can make the same argument about et cetera. All of them have their own version of this kind of insecurity complex brought about by the way that society was organized. But at some point, we got to get over that shit. Yeah. Like, I mean, the best thing, honestly, one of the best things about Star Trek was Lieutenant Uhura. They never needed to have an episode about Lieutenant Uhura being Black. No.
She's just Black.
She's just Black. It wouldn't even fit into the universe for them to do it. Like it wouldn't even make sense for them to do it.
There's only one ethnic thing in original Star Trek, right? Which is what's his name? The Russian guy.
Chekhov.
Chekhov.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that he's Russian comes up, right?
Does it?
It does. Not like a lot, but it's sort of like, like in it's in the alternate universe episode, Spock with the beard episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it emphasizes that. But no, I agree with you. I like in Billions, there's a trans character. And that character, the fact that they're trans never is mentioned, talked about. It's not part of the plot. It doesn't matter. There's no comments about it. It's like the person's trans. That's all.
It just is what it is.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. We got to get to that point.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I think the left gets this wrong. When the left is it's not that I take issue with somebody putting a person in a position because of a particular group or racial group. But they got to realize that that's just the token. That doesn't necessarily matter from the context of policy, because that person is going to be functioning with a political ideology, not necessarily a racial ideology in the way that they function. But they always push these tiny objects up. Mm-hmm. And at some point, the fact that the person is Black, gay, trans, or whatever has to not matter. They just are an American doing a job. And you can make the argument that putting them in a particular, like, for example, when Joe Biden looks like a short list,
I think,
of Black women that we're going to put on the thing. Okay, that's denigrating as opposed to just putting a Black woman in a position. Like, in one sense, I have a short list of people. In the other one, I just put the best person in the position because the person just so happened to be.
Or don't say anything and just appoint a Black woman.
Just do it.
Well, here's the problem. And I think these two things are related. One, it's easier to divide and conquer society, because if you're able to demonize another part of the population as the other, the dangerous one, the problem, and you need government to protect you from whatever that group is, like in the case of white people, you got to protect us from the evil, violent Black man, or in the case of the Black community, you got to have the government to protect you from the evil white nationalists like Robbie. And then you have the immigrants. Like, you got to have government to protect you from everybody else.
Right.
It's a power play. Second, there's a lot of money in it. I mean, let's be honest. The grievance industry in this country makes a lot of money. Rainbow Push makes a lot of money. The Reverend Al Sharpton has made a lot of money off of selling race hate. It's just part of it. And I think it's just baked in. It's another lobby like anything else.
But that's what Trump does too. I guess my point is, and I guess I agree with you, this idea of separating people through racial and those type of lines is a way of dividing and conquering.
That's how the British conquered India. They didn't go in there with armies.
It's how the Belgians conquered Rwanda.
Yeah. I mean, by the time the Indians found out that they had done got, they done about got.
It's too late.
So it is. I mean, you just let your the populations to fight each other.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think that's what we end up doing here in the States.
Yep, no question. All right, more comments. Questions. Child of God, Victoria Nuland's people who brought the Nazis back into power in Ukraine, George Soros and his people, they were all quote unquote Jewish Nazis.
I don't think the difference between these things, well, I would say Zionist Nazis. I mean, I would add Zionists to it. Because, like I said, many of the people who voted for Mamdani were Jewish. Many of the people who oppose Israeli policies are Jewish. They say it, not in my name, especially the ones in the United States and New York. the Zionists in country, those people are maniacs and lunatics. And yeah, Newland brought those criminals back in power. So, yeah.
Maybe Blue Funk, thanks very much for the $5. She asks, hey guys, I don't have a question, but agree with Robbie and Ted. The abuse of these young stars is so under-discussed. Michael Jackson, Britney, they had no one in their corner since day one. It's irresponsible. I mean, I don't remember. The other day I was listening to some dude being interviewed and he was an actor, and he was talking about he was a child star. And he sort of just said, like, I didn't have, I went to studio school starting like in 7th grade. And I'm like, why is that legal?
These people, but isn't there always a cost? Look, this is not me arguing for trauma. Yeah. Just to be very clear. But I think we'll be ignoring something if we don't kind of associate what kids went through with how they turn out. And the fact that the trauma on some level helps develop their personality or helps build character on some level.
Oh, that's true.
It depends on what it is, obviously, but it depends on, I don't know. It depends on the person. Could you get Michael Jackson without the trauma?
Maybe not. I feel like Tiger Woods probably was in some sense traumatized. He's obviously got major psychological problems. And having a father who was basically like, hey, you're 5 years old. I've decided upon your career path.
And he killed it.
But
that's what I mean. Like, Tiger Woods is the greatest ever golfer.
But Tiger Woods also lives at the bottom of a bottle, and he's he's obviously very fucked up and fucks up his relationships, and he's it's like he's not able to function well except on the golf course.
But that's what he was meant for.
Was it? That's what his father thought anyway. Yeah.
Do you know, he ended up being the greatest golfer of all time. I guess I'm saying, is it worth it?
That's my question.
I think
would he trade, like that question we had earlier? Would he trade?
I bet you the answer would be no.
I think the Star Trek episode where the transporter screws up and Kirk gets split into a good and evil half.
Yeah,
I think that's what that is. And so I've had me and Kizzy have talked about the way that I grew up and just my life, and it's just like, when you're going through that, and Ted, I know that you're able to relate to this, is that you have two choices when it comes to dealing with the lot that life gives you if you have a crappy time of it. One is that you can just give into the despair and surrender and turn to drugs and alcohol and just give up and just live in a state of depression, or you get mad. I got mad, and I was determined that I'm not going to be this person, that I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to surrender. And so that's why I would go to the library. That's why I would read. That's why I would do all these things. And that's one of the reasons why, like when my kids are younger, if I was mad, I wouldn't spank them. And so I would ask Kizzy, Kizzy, I know this is my job. I'm the father. I'm the husband. But I don't feel comfortable. Would you do this? And will you do this right now? Will you spank the kid? Because I do not trust myself at this point. Because every day, whenever I wake up, how you like to say, we like our monsters. For me, that's literal. Whenever I look in the mirror, there's two Robbies there. There's the one that is kind of just be open, just even killed, just kind of just. I like to try to be a decent guy at least. And then just a pissed off Robbie that just sees the world as just a complete shit show and everything else. And as I had their old friend, how you doing? And it just comes down to, how do you deal with that? And for me, religion was really probably the opioid that I turned into, that I turned to, because it helps me deal with it. And then just reading. Like, my daddy always said, boy, you're just going to be white trash. Ain't never going to be nothing. You're going to be an alcoholic just like me. I'm like, no, Daddy, I'll never be like you. I will never be like you. And that's my mission, is to never be like him. And so my goal is now for Thomas is for him to have the life that I was never able to have, give him as much of a future as I can, and try and teach him not to make the mistakes that I've made. If I do that, even if I die in a trailer, my life is a success. I don't have to be the star.
But that trauma,
That's how to be able to build a family.
But that trauma had real world, and you can make an argument, positive consequences for the way you came up. Look,
Oh,
I guess
I wouldn't be me without my pain. But without my pain, I would not be me.
Well, I guess that's my point. I mean, and I think that's true for everybody. That you don't get out without pain, and you don't get out without trauma. And
That's how you deal with it.
Yeah, it's how you deal with it. And, it's just kind of life. And I guess there are a lot of people who suffer trauma who didn't become the greatest golf star or the greatest pop star or the greatest whatever.
True.
I know.
All right, so we got more questions where we'll finish those out and then call it a show. All right. Okay, this one. Thank you very much to Sam Palmisano. Robbie better be staying on the show, and Sam put his money $20 where his mouth was to try to ensure that doesn't happen, that he doesn't leave. Philip Blair asks, why are Israelis obsessed with blue eyes and blonde hair? Oh, I don't know. I remember some other society that was obsessed with that.
I guess they figure it's their, I don't know, calling card from God or something. Who knows?
Weird.
I mean, it's a supremacist cult at this point.
Blake, let's get a nice shot of those big titty old bitty daddy Mikers, Teddy. Thanks for the $1. I have already stated $5,000 will do it. You are, I think, currently I'm tally. I think you still need $4,989. Yeah, you're getting there. Keep going.
We got to go fund me for this.
Yeah, maybe so.
Show Ted's tits.
Yeah, I promise you, it's not worth it. Anyway,
I don't know, man.
It's not interesting. It's not like I have there's just, I don't know what you'd expect. I don't know what you'd expect, but like a 62-year-old guy who's not in the worst or the best shape. I don't know. Mr. One Boston, and this is how. I mean, you've both seen me in person. I mean, I don't think I have an unusual physicality in any way.
I don't think I've ever met you in person, Ted.
Oh, I know. I've been in studio with you. I came into the studio. 100%.
I remember you were in DC.
Several times I've come into studio.
Okay. For some reason, I have no memory of any of those times.
Well, I won't comment on that, but yeah.
It's because you're a generic-looking white guy.
I promise you, there's video of us in studio together. I promise you.
I remember you were in town, though. I do remember you were in town. Oh, no. I remember.
I was there with you and Malik.
Yeah, that's right. Because we were supposed to get dinner that night, and I was able to go.
Yeah, Mr. One Boston, and this is how Israel has conquered America. Identity politics originates, and this is how it originates from there. Okay, and then last, Sam Palmisano. Thanks for the $20. Robbie, let's play Mecha Chameleon this week. Mecha Chameleon.
Let's do it. Reach out to me. Let me know when.
How much do we need to bribe Ted to make a stream? Not much. Does JT already have a stream account? Although, frankly, if we're going to get bribed, okay, it's going to cost $500.
Well, me and JT are supposed to be doing Civilization 6, and he's been ducking on that for a week.
On stream.
Yeah.
All right. By the way, JT, I forgot to ask you. So Trent has been trying to schedule. We kind of blew off yesterday. We were supposed to do a special. We were going to do that Rumble Premium episode where we go through our internal politics and remember
the test,
the politics test. Yeah. Are you free Tuesday tomorrow at 12?
It can't be 12. It would have to be in the evening. I have clinic tomorrow.
All right. Well,
but it could be Wednesday, or it could be either Wednesday.
Wednesday we got Q&A. Friday?
I mean, unless it's Tuesday evening, but it would have to be later in the evening.
How late?
I'll be back by 4.
By what?
I'll be back by 4.
Let's do 5.
Okay.
All right, cool. I always I remember the old TV schedules where evening was defined as starting at 6. So that's kind of like, I think of that as late afternoon. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 5 tomorrow. Okay, cool.
And there's a question for me. I missed the name. Sorry. Robbie, is that why you don't drink? And why did you spank your kids? So the reason why I don't drink is because I was always terrified I would like it too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so the best way not to go to a bar fight is I'll go to a bar. And so that's why I've never drunk. As far as spanking, I don't do drugs.
I don't do drugs because I have a tenuous hold on sanity.
Oh, that's right. You told me about that experience you had before.
Yeah.
See, it's funny because I do all that stuff. I drink and
I
smoke.
drink.
Well, that's not entirely true. My grandfather was an alcoholic, so I'm not a big fan of alcohol.
I'm wired to somehow I can handle alcohol,
Because you're
I
French.
can
maybe.
tolerate it. I just don't. I'm not a fan of it, and I'm definitely not a fan of alcoholics. I have a low opinion of alcoholics. My grandfather was an evil alcoholic. He was an angry drunk. They used to curse my grandmother up in a heartbeat. You and your N words are coming over here and fucking with, he used to think the short span was trying to have sex with my grandmother. Like, it used to be insane stuff. Like, he would come down in the middle of Bible study and flip out. Like, that is my experience with
That's
alcohol.
a bad look. Not during Bible study.
Horrible look. It's humiliating.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm out with somebody, I may drink, but all things being equal, less so. I like to smoke my liquor, as people like to say it. But even with that, I don't know. I have a high tolerance for this stuff.
Robbie, why do you spank your kids?
Yeah. So as far as spanking kids, it's that is biblical. The Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child, and then the blueness of the wounds will bring wisdom. That being said, I never spank. I never spank with my hands. My hands have always been for my kids. These have always been for loving. This is what I used to hug you with. This is what I used to comfort you with. This is what I used to love you. Used to be a father to you for. Whenever I had to spank, we would just use this old wooden spoon. So you get a few licks with a spoon, and that was your spanking. But that's why. And I always explain to
I
them,
disapprove. I'm going to say it. I disapprove. I've never once laid a hand on my kid, and I think it enhances my trust. He trusts me more, I think.
Yeah, I understand, but whenever I had to spank a kid, I always explain to him first, do you understand why this is happening? Explain to me why this is happening. And so then they would. So then you understand the consequence of your disobedience is the rod of correction being applied to your posterior, the seat of knowledge. Yes, I understand that. You get your licks.
The rod of correction.
The rod of correction applied to the seat of knowledge.
The spoon of correction.
And it always goes to the butt.
Rod of correction.
And so and then after it was done, I would always hug the kid. So I love you, but this is
Robbie, you say epic shit all the time.
Robbie, I know the psychologists of the future need to earn a living, and we're all doing our part to make sure that happens.
Yeah, the rod of correction. God, I love that. That kid is going to have a fetish about being hit with a spoon.
That's true.
When they grow up.
Yeah,
my grandmother was.
All these kinks come out.
My grandmother spanked me using the flat side of a butcher knife, and I was always scared that she was going to turn her wrist. She used the flat side of a butcher knife, and I was always scared to
Well, what was
death.
she holding? She wasn't holding the blade.
No, she's holding the handle, and they're slapping me with on the butt with the blade of the knife. She's yes, with the blade.
That's terrifying.
And yes, the psychological trauma that's why I opted for a spoon.
Oh my God. For years, I wouldn't wear a belt because my mom always went after me. She would have me strip down to my underwear, and I have to put my hands up on the sink, and then she'd go after me with the belt, and sometimes with the buckle side if I did something she thought was really wrong. The buckle would catch, and I'd have scars all over the back of my legs. Good times.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I've got scars on my legs, and I almost never go shirtless because I got burn scars on my chest when I was 5 or 6 years old. Before my mama left home, I told her, I said, "No, Mom, I'm hungry." So she just threw this pot of boiling water on me. She's like, "Here you go." So I mean, I understand the difference between abuse and a spanking.
Yeah,
they're not the same thing.
Thankfully, I've only had one beating in my life, and it was when I cut the wires to the cable cords. Usually, I wasn't a fuck up as a kid, so I was actually a good kid. It was easy.
No, that's why I left home because my dad, he just went even crazier after Mom left. And it's like, if I don't leave, I'm going to shoot my dad. I had the rifle in my hands. It's like, if I do not leave, I'm going to kill this man.
Well, that's how things stopped with me. I mean, I think I was 13 and I had a growth spurt. My mom went to take a swing at me, and I ducked. I was quick. She used to chase me around the house, and she smacked her wrist into the corner of the wall and started yelling at me because look at what you did, and now my wrist hurts, blah 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 blah. And then I suddenly had this you have that like in a movie, you would see like the close up of like the brain synapse like moving, and like, and suddenly it was just sort of like, oh, I have a realization. I'm looking right at her. I'm taller than her, and I just like grabbed her wrists and pinned her up to the wall. And I was like, and she looked scared for the very first time in my life. And I told her calmly, I said, if you ever hit me again, I'm going to wait till you're asleep. And I'm going to go into the kitchen. And I'm going to take the big knife and I'm going to come into your room and I am going to kill you. And she often thought about, I'd see this glint in her eyes whenever she wanted to hit me. And I'd be like, how do you want to sleep well tonight? You want to wake up tomorrow? And like, and then she'd be like, I'd be like, what, go ahead. No, what is it? What can I do for you? And she'd be like, never mind. And then like years later, when, the first time she ever babysat for my kid for any length of time, it was for a couple, like when I went on a trip to Central Asia. I came back and she said, I was like, how'd everything go? She said, well, it was pretty good. And she's like, at one point, she's like, hey, so do you ever think about like hitting your kid, hitting him? And I was like, I know where we're going here. Like you would like, and I'm like, let me be really, really clear. So if you ever lay a hand on him, you will never hear from me or from him the rest of your life. Are we clear? We understand each other. We have a good dialogue going on. We understand each other. And she was like, and I was like, good. So let's not ever have this discussion again.
Yeah.
And we didn't.
Don't touch my kid. I don't blame you.
Yeah. No.
I was like, you gave it the office. You got your fill with me. It doesn't go. It stops with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, I mean, the only time that I can probably count on one hand how many times that I spanked either one of my kids. It was typically always because they were being disrespectful to their mama, like just being yelling at her or something, just being obnoxious. In which case, it's like, all right, Daddy's going to take care of this. And again, I've just said to them down, just explained to them, here's what you did. You don't get to yell at your parents. That's something that you do not get to do.
Look, parenting is hard, and
it's not for the faint of heart.
All I got to say is that, like, for me, just given with my background, there was no way I was ever going to hit my kid, even to the point of like being too permissive, which I don't think I was. I mean, and the interesting thing about never hitting my kid is that I didn't need much, like to like, I remember one time he fucked up. It was a funny story. But like the local police call and they're like, long story short, he was at a wild party where some kid OD'd and he didn't do anything. And they brought it and basically the kid almost died. I'm like, why didn't you pick up the fucking phone and call 911? And he was like, well, we didn't know. We thought we'd get in trouble. And so I was like, listen, like the cops, they don't care if like a kid's going to OD. They're not going to charge you. They want you to call. It's like they're not going to charge anyone with drugs, but you don't know that, right? Like blah, 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 blah. But basically he like lied to me about it. I found out. And then I was just like, he was like, oh, Dad, are we okay? And I'm like, I'm really disappointed is what I said, just like that. And it was like, it would be like if I'd hit him, you know what I mean? Because like it was shattering for him because I never hit him. So that was, and I never said I was disappointed in him because I'm not generally, I'm really proud of him, but it's like, yeah.
Essential scale.
Yeah.
Essential scale. Well, guys, we have come to the end.
We have. Thanks. Sorry for going over, guys. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. You've been watching the Q&A episode of DeProgram. We'll be back to the regular show Monday through Friday. Tomorrow's Tuesday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The next Q&A will be on Wednesday at 12 noon. Thank you very much for tuning in and see you gentlemen later. And don't forget, tomorrow we have that 5 o'clock taper. Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye, y'all.
Oh, here we go.
Click that button. Click that button.
Click it.